Hey there, friends. Welcome to the Being Brown and Bold podcast. I'm your host, Jess Thomas. We're so glad that you're joining us for all of our amazing conversations about stepping out of our comfort zone, being bold, and taking chances. Today, I get to hang out with Cheetie Kumar. She is the chef owner of Ajja, a restaurant in Raleigh's Five Points neighborhood that draws inspiration from the diverse foodways and cultures, vibrant spices, and cooking techniques of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, and beyond. Ajja opened in June 2023 and is a James Beard Foundation Award semifinalist for Best New Restaurant. Ajja was also named an Esquire Best New Restaurant and Eater's Best New Carolinas Restaurant. An India and Bronx-raised Southerner and musician, Cheetie earned 2 James Beard Foundation Award nominations and 5 semifinalist nods for Best Chef Southeast for her multicultural menus that blended the flavors of South Asia and the surrounding regions with local agriculture at the beloved Garland, which closed in 2022. Ajja builds on the legacy of Garland and continues telling the rich story of North Carolina's growers, farmers, and purveyors in a vibrant indoor-outdoor neighborhood restaurant. Cheetie is active in food advocacy and serves on the board of the Independent Restaurant Coalition, the Southern Foodways Alliance, and several North Carolina-based organizations. In fall 2023, Cheetie joined World Central Kitchen Chef Corps, a global network of culinary leaders who champion World Central Kitchen's work providing fresh meals following crises. So, Cheetie, it is so great to have you here today on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, finally.
Yeah, it's taken a while, but you've been a little busy the past couple of years. So
yeah.
And what I love about it is you have so many different parts of your life, and especially your advocacy work. I love how you care so much about justice. And that's one of the things that drew me to you, of that part for caring about people. But we will get into that later. Before all of that, tell me a little bit about yourself. What does it mean to be you?
I am a little bit of a weirdo, I think. I never have kind of taken a straight and narrow path. I like things that are unpredictable and a little bit more surprising, maybe countercultural. I believe strongly in community. I love food. I really love music. I love playing guitar. I like to find creative solutions, and I love impactful and meaningful conversations, and I don't like small talk.
I don't think I've ever done small talk with you. Now that I think of it, I think everything we've talked about has been significant, which I love. It almost feels like you're an old soul.
I'm just old.
We're the same age. We're both young, and but maybe our bodies, I don't know, my body doesn't understand that I'm still young.
Some days that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about your cultural heritage and how that has informed your work and your life.
I mean, I think that's such a central part of who I am and continues to be as I uncover even more about my heritage and learn more about the complex nature of being Indian. My parents are both Indian. My mom is Punjabi, or was Punjab from what is now Pakistan. That's where she was born. And when she was a little girl, their family had to move because they were Hindu, and there was a religious division of India that was kind of instigated by the British, and a couple of million people were killed in the process. And my grandparents and my uncles were among those killed in that move. And my mom was present as a little girl. So her kind of, really deep trauma, the massacres that she witnessed as a young girl, was something that she never talked about, not very much anyway. And I was aware of the story very, very young. My parents moved to America. I think both my parents were really eager to put the very tumultuous 40s in India behind them, and really worked hard to get higher education. They were both scientists. They moved to America. They moved back to India. At the very end of their first stay in the US, I was born here. And I was a little baby when we moved back to India, and we lived there until I was 9, and then we moved to the Bronx. So we had sort of a very ping-pongy life. And so I was an immigrant in India. I was an immigrant in India, but I was too little to really know what was going on. But I was an immigrant in the United States. And, the whole time we were in India, my parents really wanted to come back. That leaving was not something I think that they intentionally chose to do, but immigration is complicated, as we all know. But when we moved to the Bronx, it was like not what, I pictured the sparkling golden streets of the United States to be. But what it did was give us a very multicultural upbringing. And I was in public school with people from all over, most of the world. It kind of prolonged my ability to sort of find a sense of identity and place because there weren't that many other Indian people. But it also taught me that the world is very complicated. It's not unilateral. And I didn't feel like the only foreigner in school. It wasn't that. It was just that there was a bunch of isolated kids that had friends that didn't speak the same language as their parents, and they all had weird refrigerators with strange pickles and odors. So we related on that level. I think later on, after I moved to Raleigh, I kind of realized living in a city the size of Raleigh was very much like my home in India, Chandigarh, very architecturally similar, which is an interesting and unusual thing to say about living in, an American city and having an analogous Indian city to compare it to. But I think the agricultural aspect of being in the South and having a farmer's market that's really old and open all the time, really there was a unspoken connection that I didn't unpack later on. And it really made me understand the history of the South, the history of agriculture and produce here. And I started to draw some analogies between what we ate in my house growing up and what people eat here in the South. And that was just sort of like the tip of the iceberg. And I started peeling back the layers, and it really made me understand that I've always kind of just looked for connections. So as much as I kind of intellectually try to understand the complex and rich, incredibly rich, endlessly rich history of India and the cultural and the food ways of that country that are way more than butter chicken and chicken tikka masala, way, way more. I have that experience that I think a lot of immigrants have, that they don't really belong anywhere. I'm not quite American enough here, but I'm not really Indian either because I only spent 9 years of my life there. There's a sort of an unspoken connection that I have. And sometimes it's intellectual and sometimes it's more than that. It's in my DNA for sure.
When I heard that you were from New York, as I was born in Queens, and when I was 3, my parents had really thought about going back to India because they were used to all the people who had left Kerala, got education, and a lot of them went to another country to make money, and a lot of people went to the Middle East, where you can't get citizenship, you can't own anything. So it was just kind of understood. They're there for a season, they're going to come home. And I think my parents and some of the immigrants from the 70s, late 60s, thought the same thing. But then they realized they could make a life for themselves here. There were more Malayali people, at least, coming to America, so their community. So they're like, but do we even go back to India? And that's when they decided, no, let's just stay in America. It's fine. But I think part of the early issues were discrimination, especially with jobs. My mom was stable because she was a nurse, and a lot of the nurses in her hospital were immigrants. But for my dad, who had to figure out how to do his career coming from a business background in India, but not owning any business, he started out in nonprofits, eventually went to corporate. But it was hard to put all those things together. So there was this concept of, we're here in the land of opportunity, but like you said, it wasn't like shiny and pretty and everything's just given to you. Or do we go back? And they finally decided, let's just stay here and make a life for themselves here. And it worked out for them well, but like all immigrant families, it was hard. It was a lot of struggle and identity and community. But I never, ever thought about going back to India. And I don't know if you had this growing up, of this, everybody that I knew, my peers, had this rejection of our Indian background because we're trying to be American. And so I don't know if you had that experience, especially because you said you didn't have many Indian families around you.
Yeah, not at all growing up at all. I mean, we were kind of in a part of the, more Puerto Rican, Dominican, Irish, Jewish kids, and, even kids from like Eastern Europe. There was one girl from Sri Lanka, and that's it. And she was like, "Oh, you're new here. maybe get cooler, and then we can be friends." Parents were really the first wave of immigrants from India. I mean, immigration from India wasn't even really allowed.
Right.
People from Asia weren't allowed to be here until the late 50s. So it was unusual for people to be Indian and for, women to wear saris, or if those spices weren't available. I mean, it was really just like the first wave. So, being a child of that, like there's no example. There's no Mindy Kaling. There's no, never have I ever like seen Indian girls on TV. Like I could not have imagined, even when that show came on a few years ago, I was like really emotional. Like I wish I had had that example of being included, on television. That's not like a caricature.
Right, right. We didn't have anybody to look up to. I remember there were shows, well, there were some racist things. Like, I don't know if you remember the Pink Panther, where the star of one of them was in brown face. I don't know if you saw that one.
Yeah, I think maybe the movie The Party, Peter
Yes.
Sellers. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember thinking that's really weird because he's supposed to be Indian, but he's obviously not Indian. And I think for me, I wasn't offended at that time. I think I was just really confused. Like, I don't get what's happening here. I'm kind of happy there's representation, but it's not. But I was so young, I didn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember the Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, yes.
That was bad.
That was
I
bad.
hated it.
Okay. Did you go to school and people asked if you ate chilled monkey brains?
100%.
Yep. Yep.
Oy.
Yeah.
At least we've evolved from there, so that's good.
Yeah. So when you were little, what did you imagine your life would be like when you grew up?
I think some kids have the fortune of knowing what they want to be. Like my sister always knew she wanted to be a doctor. I never really could. People would say, well, you'll get married and have kids and you'll be a doctor. And I would like really reach inside and go, I don't see it, but maybe I'll have a nervous breakdown and that'll happen. I don't know. I never have really been good at that exercise. I think I like to leave my options open. I'm a little bit adventurous, and so I don't spend too much time kind of sussing out concrete goals. I kind of like go with what I want to feel like.
So even though you had spent all that time in India, do you ever imagine that you would go back to India and live there?
No, definitely not. We didn't go back for a really long time. We had to wait for visas and all that. And then when I finally went back, I realized that I'm an American. I really am. I love India. I really love being there, but I could never live there again.
Were you fluent in Punjabi or Hindi back then?
I was fluent in Hindi. I still can speak it, fluently, especially if I'm around people who speak it. But my reading and writing ability is like really bad.
When I was little, my parents didn't know you could teach a child multiple languages. So they actually, when they made the decision to stay in America, they stopped speaking to me in Malayalam. And
Wow.
I just watched PBS. Like that was my babysitter. So I learned English from Mr. Rogers and Sesame Street and Electric Company. And they would speak to each other in Malayalam, but I wouldn't pay attention to them. I caught very little. And only by the time I was maybe like fourth grade, my parents were like, wait a minute, she doesn't know any Malayalam. But their peers, their friends who came to America, their kids were only allowed to speak Malayalam at home. And they're like, wait, we didn't do that. So then they tried to do it. I was like, too late. Like, I don't want to.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's not a good age to introduce like your foreign culture.
So when you were like in high school, did you have because it obviously wasn't going to be medical, did you have a career path that you were even thinking of? Were you like, I'm definitely going to be a musician or culinary?
No, I was really drawn to music, but my parents laughed at me about that. And when I went to college in UMass, and I didn't really know what I was going to do. I honestly just felt really lost because I didn't feel like I had the option to really explore the things that I was really interested in, passionate about. I don't think that my parents, like most immigrants from India especially, saw a path that didn't involve higher education and, job security and a degree, like a very secure path. And I don't blame them. I thought for a minute that I wanted to go to film school, and that didn't really like work out because I couldn't move to the West Coast. I did get into UCLA, but anyway, I didn't end up going there. So I majored in psychology, but I spent all of my time working at the radio station at the concert board and exploring that. I read a lot, and I was into philosophy and English and more theoretical psychology aspects and not so much clinical. So I kind of just, shoehorned my way into a career in music management for a few years, right? Like when I was 19, 20, 21. Moved here, worked with some bands, got them record deals, and then they all broke up. And it's like, now what? So that's when I started playing guitar and explored, that path for a little while.
Did you take guitar lessons when you were growing up?
Yeah.
Oh, you only picked it up as an adult.
My sister had an acoustic guitar and I kind of learned chords, but I really wanted to play electric guitar, which we didn't have. And my parents were like, we're not getting an electric guitar. Are you crazy? Right. I started playing a little bit while I was still managing bands. But then, I was in my 20s when I started really playing and learned, guitar solos, just practice and practice and practice. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you had mentioned you were like a weirdo growing up. Did you feel like you didn't fit in with your, I don't know, friend group in your school because you just were different than everybody else?
I did always kind of feel that way. And it wasn't really even just because of my racial or immigrant status. I think I just kind of didn't belong to the stoners. I didn't belong to, I was a really good student, but I didn't really belong to the nerds. I don't know. I didn't really have like a clique that I could fall into. And looking back, that really hurt at the time. When you're 14, you really want to just be like, have some BFFs. But looking back, I think that was a blessing because I just kind of learned how to forge my own way.
Now, we both are from New York and we both live in the South. For you, did it feel like a drastic transition moving down here?
It was, but it was on purpose and it was something that I really wanted. Going through public school in the Bronx is not fun. And I was kind of like, New York has like really high energy, but the converse of that is that like you're always kind of plugged in, and I just needed to exhale. And honestly, like after growing up there and going to UMass, like I just wanted no winter. I moved down here and it was very different, but it was a welcome change. It was really like the sense of community here was the thing that I really loved, and life just felt approachable, and I just needed it to be slower so I could figure out what I wanted to do. I was really like, struggling with that aspect of it. And there were things about New York that I really miss, and I miss now, which is having other people that do cool things and like create a life for themselves that's interesting and unique, and having those kind of role models. I really wanted that in my 20s, especially, but I figured out a way to travel. So Raleigh was a great place to come home to.
Do you know this comedian? I think her name is Zarna. She's like an auntie that like tells jokes, but she's really not telling jokes. She's kind of just explaining the Indian perspective of life, and people think it's funny. So yeah, I saw a recent clip where she was telling people, hey, everybody in this country, did you know parents aren't allowed to choose the career of their children? What is up with that? And so did your parents feel like that part of being Indian was in their parenting and their expectations of you and your sister?
My parents, I think we kind of raised them too,
Yeah.
They moved to, and I remember my mom saying like, we didn't move to America so we could have a little microcosm of India in our house. They really try to rationalize how the path that they chose for us as a family being in America involved not being very traditional, not being like what was expected, and to be open-minded and forward-thinking. I don't think they expected me to take it quite as far as I did. And I think that they would have been really a lot more secure and happy if I had gotten a career that I could just like say, she's an engineer or she's a lawyer. But they exercised a lot of patience with me. And I know that they were worried. I left home at 17. And, after that, it was just like, I take care of myself. I'll make a living. And, you may be embarrassed by what your friends asking you what your second daughter does, but ultimately, I think once I really had a career as a chef. They were really proud of that, and they were very supportive of that choice. With the music stuff, I think they just worried it wasn't very stable, and I had to, bartend to support that. And I think they were just kind of concerned about that lifestyle.
Yeah, because it's that stability. Like they came all the way here to have this life for us and choices where we could be stable, and things that
Right.
are unknown feel chaotic to them.
The thing that leads you to be really free is to be able to explore, and exploration is not a secure path.
It's so funny because I left home at 17 also, and I went to Massachusetts for college also, and I also did not do anything traditional. I went into advertising PR. It was College of Communications, but I wanted to go into advertising PR. What was your major when you went to college, and did your parents
Psychology.
approve? Oh, it was psychology. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. My dad was like, you should be industrial psychologist. And I was like, you mean like sell toilet paper to people? I don't think so. So, I mean, he wanted me to study like consumer trends because, those kind of people make a lot of money. Yeah, I think they recognized that I was very empathetic as a kid. And I recognized how much trauma my parents had. I always was a very psychologically mature kid, which I kind of set aside and had my youth in my 20s. I think they thought that I was naturally good at that. And it's the last thing I wanted to do. Once I went through school, I was like, man, I'm sick of being people's therapist. Like I just, was my family therapist for, my whole childhood. So I think I'm not going to do that.
Stereotypically, a central focus in the life of a brown person is generally marriage. And in the States, my peers, all of us were told, don't date anybody, just finish your education, then get a job, and then you can think about marriage. And some of us were able to choose our spouses with no problems, but then they say, oh yeah, but like, don't waste so much time, just like find somebody and marry them right away. Were you told these things when you were growing up?
No, thankfully I wasn't. My parents were an intercaste marriage, which was really unheard of back in, their time. But again, my mom was an orphan and she went to boarding school, and she was, one of not many females in a graduate school program. And my dad was in that same program. They met, and, I don't think that they had like a long courtship or anything, but I think my mom's family was kind of relieved that they didn't have to find her husband, because that's a whole process in India. If my parents had expectations of our spouse finding, especially like my sister's older than me, so their first two children are girls. They weren't really vocal. They never said like we have to find you a husband. Like, but again, like I was still 17 when I left home, and they didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't date it in high school or anything like that. I was not allowed to do anything like that. They kind of focused a lot of their energy on my sister and her medical school education, and my brother is younger. And I think that they were just like, she'll be fine. So
the middle child syndrome.
Exactly. Like, oh wait, yeah, you're still here. I forgot. My sister really had that timetable kind of ingrained in her, but I think that was more societal than my parents. I didn't personally feel that pressure from them, thankfully. But, Paul and I met when I was still like really young, and we've just been together ever since. And they just really liked him. So it didn't really become an issue.
Yeah. He's very likable. So I can see why. As I'm listening to you, you seem like an old soul that is an artist. Like you understand the world and see things differently because your eyes are like a different world view. And that's why you can contribute so much to the world, because you're bringing this creativity and energy. And it's neat that you have these components. I think reading, like you said, I feel so sad for like the younger generations that don't read and don't experience the bigger world, because that's how we experienced it, right? When we were trapped in our Indian homes. But if I read, I can explore the world. And then just your interest in philosophy and art and music, like all that stuff, it's amazing. And then also, you encountered cultures in India as well as New York being multicultural. That's a lot of different backgrounds, but then also faiths and world views. So now that you're here with all these experiences, has there been any specific faiths or belief systems that have helped you in your outlook in life?
Once we moved to America, we didn't really have like an organized faith ritual. I guess, we would have puja in our house and on Sundays, and I hated it, of course.
So
Like kids
boring.
roll their eyes like, oh my God, why do we have to do puja? It's so stupid. But my mom was also very philosophical, and she raised herself in that way. She read the Gita very religiously, like no pun intended. And she and I used to spend a long time, like especially when we first moved back to America. I think she was having a really hard time that I didn't understand why. Now looking back, it's like, yeah, any migration is going to be triggering for her, right? She would read passages from the Gita and interpret them. There was like a period of 2 years when I went to Catholic school because it was the safest school and it was down the street. And my brother and I could walk there. She encouraged us to think globally and to understand that all religions have the same kind of basic tenets, and then they're all just interpreted different ways. I am a Hindu and by birth, but I don't go to temple. I've never really been a practicing religious person. I believe in love, I believe in compassion, and I believe in treating people with kindness, and I believe in self-improvement more than anything. I've tried exploring that, but I think it's a very like quiet and personal and not organized kind of faith that I have. I have faith in life and I have faith in people.
And I feel like you find dignity in people and worth in people, which a lot of organized religions try to teach. Do you feel like this is why you're involved in justice work? Because you see that inherent worth and value in people regardless of their background?
Yeah, I think I'm really big on fairness, and that's just something I always have. I should have been a lawyer, I can kind of see advantages that people have or really more disadvantages that some people have. And I think that there is a way to kind of help people level the playing field, especially as an immigrant. I now see like how much people have a head start when they have stability and wealth and no discrimination and heritage and all of those things that really only just put you at zero. But there's so many things that take you back 5 steps before you even start. And I think that I believe that society has a compassionate obligation to help people get ahead. I think that's it's fair. I don't think anybody should be hungry or sick. That's not their fault. There are a lot of societal injustices that we accept, and I just think that there's other ways to see things.
There's a lot of things that should not be happening and so many things that should that aren't.
Yeah.
And as we, look at our country and see, I just see more and more gaps in places that this should be common sense that you just take care of people and treat people with love. I don't understand.
Yeah, I don't either. I think, having a big open heart is like the key to a joyful life.
Okay, you do so much. Like it's hard to keep track of you. And I feel like between like your work, your advocacy, your volunteering, you have all that going on. How do you take care of yourself? How do you take care of your marriage? How do you take care of your friendships? Like, how do you do it all?
I think that I don't do as much as you think. It's a constant practice. Like there are, and that's sort of like one of the reasons why I ended up closing Garland was because that whole complex, we had a music venue and a restaurant and a bar all in one place. And just for a variety of reasons, like I didn't really feel that that was a sustainable life. It was not that it was not successful, it was. But what it took out of my life and what of Paul's life and our life together, in order for it to be sustainable, was not sustainable for us, And I think that ended up becoming a really obvious choice for us. And so since 2022, us opening Ajja in a way that is more supported and supportive of our life, and also just like the life of everybody who works there, like just setting up a structure with that in mind, and not just like profitability. I feel so rewarded by that, Now I just put some placeholders in my days that are kind of non-negotiable, and it's not always successful, and sometimes I don't find that balance and I can really feel it. But the older I get, the more I realize like that battery isn't going to last forever. I know what makes me feel good, like getting enough sleep, eating at the right time, being healthy, exercising, having time to myself. I'm kind of an introvert, and I need that alone time to recover, and like, connection with my friends is all really important. And I don't respond to my emails as fast as I used to. Some things are a little bit slower, but there's only so many hours in the day, and there's only so much battery power that I have. So it's a choice. It's a daily choice. You can ride out the hard times and the busy days as long as you know that you have something coming up that's going to nourish you and take care of yourself. I think that's really, really, really important. Just seeing my parents kind of pass, I've understood like the mortality that we have and the fragility of life. And, things are like on my deathbed, I'm not going to be like, well, I finished my prep list. It's going to be like, I'm going to have memories that hopefully are really valuable. And those are the things that carry you over to, forever. Those are forever memories, not work.
I feel like that was one of the big things I left when I left the New York area, is this frenetic busyness. And being down here, like every morning, I can get up early enough to go into my garden and pick flowers, and now zucchini and tomatoes, which is the best. But every one of my peers that stayed in the Northeast, they don't have that option because they just keep going. I mean, just commuting to work is taking like an hour and a half of their morning, right? I think there is something about the South that has healed that frenetic busyness in me. That's one of the things I appreciate about being down here. That's probably been the best transition for me.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think being in nature is really important, and having just vegetation and fresh air and clean and plants and touching flowers and touching freshly picked tomatoes, the warm tomato off the vine. I mean, it's nothing better. That's
yes.
Nice.
Yes. Do you have a curry leaf plant?
I don't, but I want one really badly. I am not a good gardener. My husband has really started to cultivate his plant habit. His parents were both great gardeners, but my parents were not. This is a goal of mine, and I really want to be able to grow. I would love to have a curry plant, but we
Yeah.
just put mint in a box, and I'm really happy that it didn't die. And everybody's like, you can't kill mint, but I have killed mint in my life, so
I
I'm
have
just
also.
baby steps.
Right. Well, do you know I have this plant giving away thing that I do? A curry plant?
No,
Oh,
no, I
yes.
didn't.
I've given away curry plants, but if I'm like able to meet up with you, I will give you a curry leaf plant because I have,
Oh
when the
my God.
babies come, I repot them. I just gave one after my parents, they have the greenest thumb, and where they live in Long Island, that land used to all be great farmland. So their soil is great, even after all these years, but they're great with curly leaf plants. They have like massive trees that they bring in the house every winter and bring it out in the summer. And so they also collect the babies and give them away. So I was just in New York. I had Chef Cheetie Kumar in here from SEMA, and
Hmm?
he had talked about not having a plant. And I was like, oh, I will give you one. So I was just able to give him one. And then Margaret
Amazing.
Pack in Chicago, I sent one plant with my daughter in her car because she was driving back home to Chicago. I was like, give this to Margaret. So I will give you, I have 3 right now. 1, 2, 3. I have 4 right now. So I will give you one
Oh,
and
amazing.
give you all the
Thank you.
tips.
This is the
If
best chain letter I've ever heard.
I feel like it connects all of us because some people I've talked to, they're like, oh, I don't bother because I can just buy it from the store. But you really can taste a difference when you take it off the plant and you get it
Yeah.
from the store. Even though it's fresh, I can taste the difference. So
Yeah, I mean, it's been picked for however long. My brother lives in Miami, and he's got a really great curry
uh,
like hedge almost. And yeah, you're right. It's different. And the little berries when they come up, I mean, I
yeah.
don't love the way they taste, but it was so interesting to me to taste it. It had like a little bit of like Szechuan peppercorn situation going on,
Oh, I
a
didn't
little
even
bit.
think I didn't even think of eating it. I was just like, oh, here's a seed. We should like plant it. But I have not been able to grow from seed. I've only been
Uh-huh.
able to do like little babies grow around the main root and you just take it out and you put it in a pot. It's not
Oh,
that hard to
do you see
redo it.
those?
Yeah, it's fascinating. So,
Wow.
yeah,
It wants to live. That's so great.
yeah. And it might die, or usually what happens to all of us is the first year in the winter when you bring it inside, it'll start getting like sticky and spider mites and weird things. And then you just strip all of it off. If you have a little neem oil, you like kind of rub it on there and then just let it sit, because it may not do anything, but if you bring it outside in the summer, all of a sudden magically it just starts again. And so, yeah.
I'm excited and hopeful and a little scared.
Yeah, and it's okay to be scared because we all started that way too. And if it does actually die, I'll bring you another one. And eventually, like it'll take, like mine is only this big, but it should be like to the roof now, because, or to the ceiling. But it keeps dying and then it keeps kind of starting over. Actually, it's like the fun and magic of watching things grow that you're really not in charge of. Like you can help it as much as you can, but eventually it's just going to do its thing.
Do its own thing. Yeah,
yes.
That's awesome. Well, thank you. I'm so
Oh,
excited.
yes. Okay, go-to drink. Would it be chai, tea, coffee, mango lassi, limca? What's your like fun beverage?
Well, I can't live without tea. That's what I drink in the morning. I really only drink coffee like a few times a week. I love coffee, but I'm not, I'm not a person that like wakes up and drinks coffee. I wake up and drink tea. I can't live without chai.
So do you mean chai or do you mean like tea, like British tea with hot water?
Well, in, daily, it's just British tea,
Yeah.
regular, just tea with milk and a little sugar.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll make chai, on Sundays, especially if it's not too hot out or if
Yeah.
friends are over, definitely make chai.
I have started drinking chai really during the pandemic for Ayurvedic reasons, because I'm like, I know like the ginger and the cloves, like I know they're all good for me. And I mean, it's in my food, but I don't cook Indian food that often. So for a
Yeah.
daily vitamin, I will do my chai, but my taste preference.
We boil ginger in our tea water like almost all the time.
Oh, okay.
We just have ginger tea, but it's
Yeah,
not like we don't boil the milk with it. And, that's the
right.
thing about chai is like it's a lot of milky things. And
Yes,
so that's why I don't do it every day.
right, right. No, that totally makes sense. If you could go back in time, what would you say to your 17-year-old self?
We would have a very long conversation. I was so insecure and lost. I think I would tell my 17-year-old self that most people have three careers in their life, and to like do the thing that makes sense for you now and
Mm,
find yourself and learn how to learn, and buy a guitar as soon as possible.
that's great advice. If there is someone listening who is hesitant about making a bold move, what would you say to them?
I think that it's important to have really quiet gut checks with yourself. Fear has a lot of purposes, but it cannot be your boss. Sometimes fear is an indication that you're about to do something really great and you're going to explore unknown territories, which is like the whole thing about life. It's boring to just keep doing the same thing. But, you have to really understand fear from like a, a gut feeling telling you this is not the right thing for you. So
Mm,
I think, taking the time to really trust yourself and visualize what that move would feel like for you. Like think about what your days would be. If you're entering a partnership of any kind, think about what that would be like to spend 15 hours a day with that person, or a new job or whatever. But I think a lot of times running towards fear is a really important exercise, and understanding really what it is that's scaring you. And that, I think, that's the only purpose of fear. Otherwise it'll just ruin your life.
did you see Inside Out too?
No.
Oh, especially since you're a psychology person, you should see it because it's so creative. The way that they took these different emotions that we consider negative, like anxiety and fear and shame. And
Oh wait, is this the cartoon?
yes,
Is that? Oh, I did see that. I saw the first one. I did not see the second one.
the second one is great because the girl is like hitting puberty. So these new
Uh-huh.
emotions are coming in. And the takeaway is all these emotions, it's not that they're negative, they're all there to serve us in different ways, but
Yeah.
not to overcome us like fear or
Mm-hmm.
anxiety. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think you would like it.
I loved that first one. I thought that was, what a great thing for kids to see. Like somebody's driving. Who's driving right now? I
Yeah.
think that's important thing to like understand that you have the ability to switch drivers. It's really
Right.
great.
I wish I had that movie when I was like a teenager or preteen.
Right.
That would have been so helpful.
And really helpful, right? We
Yeah.
had to figure it all out on our own.
Other than coming to Ajja or following you on Instagram, is there anything else that you have coming up that you would like to share?
Doing some fun things in Birmingham. We're hosting in Raleigh the Southern Foodways Alliance's symposium for the first time.
Oh,
Moving
neat.
out of Oxford, and so it's going to be in Raleigh in the last weekend of October, Sunday and Monday. I think if people come to Raleigh, there's a lot of really great restaurants here, and I think you could make a really fun weekend out of it, as you have in the past. So.
I've always wanted to come to the symposium.
There is a cool thing that's happening. There's an exhibit in the Museum of Art in Raleigh, and it's a Venetian Ottoman Empire exploration, and I just did like a video with recipes using saffron and rose, because those two things were like important in the trade routes between those two cultures. So that's pretty cool. I'm working on a spice blend. Hopefully that'll be approved by the ag department to sell over there too. So yeah,
that's really cool.
October through January, I think is the dates for lots of reasons to come. Yeah.
Yes, there's too many reasons to come. I should just come. Thank you so much for joining me. This was awesome to have this conversation, because I feel like we keep passing by each other and don't get to actually hang out. So this was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate the conversation and, the very thoughtful insights that we had together.